Let's get right into things with the coronavirus. Obviously, there was the announcement of the lottery last week over at Allegiant Stadium. How confident are you that this is going to be the nudge to get more Nevadans vaccinated?
Yeah, well, it was a raffle incentive program.
Raffle.
It's clear it's not a lottery. You got to make that clear
Fair enough.
comply with NRS. I'm very confident. I'm hopeful that people will see it for what it is. It goes over 8 weeks. It's going to give folks an opportunity to be entered 8 times to win a series of prizes, all culminating with the grand prize in 8 weeks, which would be $1 million to one individual. So it's certainly an incentive to get people to get their vaccination if they haven't gotten it yet. And those that all got their vaccine will also be entered. So that gives them the fairness of, because they got it when they were available to them. So people have been very positive about it.
I think it might be worth clarifying again where this money is coming from, given the financial constraints of the state. For people that maybe don't know the machinations, where is the money for the raffle coming from?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. The money's coming from our federal allocation, that it was made clear the money that the federal government gave to each of the states to use in fighting coronavirus and getting vaccines and getting testing and setting up protocols and PPE and all that sort of thing. It's coming from the pot of money that they gave us for dealing with COVID.
So it's not like it could be put back into the rainy day fund or could go towards other myriad things that are needed in Nevada right now.
Yeah, no, it can't. And there are a myriad of things that are needed, absolutely. But this money is limited. All the money that we get from the federal government is usually earmarked. It's pretty much constricted. It's siloed into certain areas, as the same with this money.
Speaking of things that are needed in the state, at the State of the State address at the beginning of the year, you had several sort of key issues, one of them being innovation zones. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen at the legislative session.
Right.
Try and...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask again to try and articulate, if you can, what happened between State of the State and the end of the session where the innovation zone up in Story County didn't happen.
Yeah, well, basically we ran out of time. I still think an innovation zone is a potentially great idea. If we need to change things that are happening in Nevada, and we do, we need to change how we're funding education. We need to change the diversity in the jobs that we have. We need to change, our forward thinking. I think an innovation offers an opportunity. We made it into a study where it's going to be manned by people from the legislature to sit down and understand the intricacies of it. It's an important issue. It deals with a lot of different areas, but you have to address the tax revenue and the water situation and the housing costs and the infrastructure costs and all of those things. And the way the legislature was going when it wasn't open to the public and you couldn't get in, and then when people were allowed to call in for public comment, it was limited to 2 minutes and, per person and 30 minutes total. It wasn't conducive to something of this magnitude. So I'm hopeful that during this time here before the next legislative session that they'll take the time to really research this and understand and put in the time that we did to fully vet what an innovation zone would be and the benefits that come from it and hopefully come to the right decision.
I'm wondering what conversations you and your staff had with the people in Story County before the State of the State, because following that and through the legislative session, at least in my discussions with the county manager and others up there, they felt completely out of the loop. And obviously they're not happy with the idea of, if this goes forward the way it was presented initially, it would be self-autonomous, self-governing, and would be isolated from essentially Story County.
Well, we do the best we can to maintain communications with all 17 counties, and that's just it. There isn't just 1 or 2 of them. There's 17 counties that we try to stay in contact with. I know that the people that were advocating for the innovation zones met with Story County. Some of the legislators that represent those areas were involved in the discussion, and we had the discussions that we possibly could. Now, can you ever have enough discussions? No. That's why the problem you had with a short session when we're only there for 120 days. Also, with the restrictions related to COVID, I couldn't call a meeting where I had, 25 people come in to the governor's office or the Capitol and say, okay, let's all sit around the table here and talk about the benefits of an innovation zone and what it would provide to the state because of the protocols that were in place. So hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future and get people to understand exactly the benefits that it is, because Story County would benefit tremendously as a result of what innovation zone would bring.
And acknowledging the restrictions made it hard to do and still makes it hard to do a lot of things right now. But it just would seem to me that if this was sort of one of the three main things that were mentioned in your State of the State, it would have been worthwhile to at least talk to the folks who live there.
Well, we did have conversations. As I will say, there weren't enough conversations either way. They did not express their displeasure with it to me either early on. So we found out a lot as we went along, and we tried to adjust for that. But it's tough when you have a session that's limited to 120 days. And there's so many bills coming out of the legislature that we just couldn't get this one on the front burner fast enough to make those calls.
Final question on this, acknowledging there's a study going on this, but would you see a zone like this happening where the self-governing aspect of it is gone? Is that a deal breaker essentially?
Well, I don't know. One of the issues you've got is they want control, and these are part of the discussion that has to be brought forward. Somebody that's going to invest billions of dollars into a development wants some say so over the zoning as it relates to that, over the type of development that's going to relate to that, type of schools that are going to be in there. They want some input on that. And you can see what we have in Southern Nevada with a master plan community. This is bigger than that. And we're familiar with it in Southern Nevada. It's not something that they experienced up in Story County. So those are good points, but we're going to have that discussion. But we have to start thinking of ways to change our economy, to change the way things are going. And I think innovation zones offer that potential. You got a lot of money that's on the sidelines around the world that we could attract to come to Nevada, and it creates tens of thousands of jobs. People lose sight of that. I mean, we're talking about an economy that's been hit devastatingly in terms of loss of jobs all over the state. And this would give people an opportunity to go back to work and make a living.
I'm gonna get back to the unemployment issue in a second, but first, another issue from the legislative session, measures regarding the death penalty. You oppose the death penalty. There is a death penalty case that will likely be delayed, but it's, there's an execution sort of on the relatively immediate horizon here. How do you feel about the Department of Corrections using experimental drug cocktails for the death penalty in Nevada? And would you like the state to alter what qualifies for it, even if the death penalty isn't abolished?
Well, you've got several questions in there. I can't speak as it relates to the Zane Floyd case that the DA is bringing forward, because that's under litigation right now, and that's working its way through the courts, and hopefully they'll come to a resolution in terms of how to deal with it quickly. As it relates to the issue that came before me in Carson City, or didn't get to my desk, that issue never came to my office prior to the legislative session, in terms of trying to understand what would be palatable for me and my administration, and what we'd accept and what we wouldn't. It came out of the legislative session, and I have some cases, having gone through 1 October personally. I am not a strong supporter of the death penalty being used as often as it's being used right now. But in the worst of the worst cases, like we had at 1 October, I think that option should be made available. So we'd have to make some type of accommodation for concerns. But here again, that is such a groundbreaking issue. It's so crucial. People are so passionate on both sides of that issue that you need to have a thorough vetting of that question. And you can't do that when you have Zoom calls and people are limited to 2 minutes of conversation, and you can only get 10 or 15 people into the conversation to voice their opinion. We needed to have the opportunity to have extensive meetings as it relates to that. And this just didn't happen this legislative session.
And one of the other issues that was, maybe you would suggest, delayed by Zoom calls and so forth, is the ongoing issue with Dieter and unemployment. There's been, I don't know, 3 or 4, I forget the number of people who are at the head of Dieter since the beginning of the pandemic. And there are still issues that people have with getting their benefits taken care of. What needs to be done, and what's taking so long?
Well, Dieter is a major problem. I don't think anyone can deny that. But you're finding out across the country that the estimates are 50% of the cases that were applied for of Dieter benefits were fraudulent. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars were applied for, and money got paid out on fraudulent claims. And we need to do more in concert with the Attorney General and Department of Justice to prosecute those people. That all being said, We inherited a broken system that was never set up to handle anywhere near the capacity that came in as a result of the pandemic. We put people in there, the system crashed, we fixed it, it crashed, we fixed it, it crashed. And we did what we can to deal with people, but those are skilled positions that people need to be trained for in order to evaluate claims. We're getting them out as fast as we possibly can. It was unfortunate that it's taken this long, but this is a common problem all over the country. I'm not making excuses for it, but I'm saying that we need to fix the system completely so that next time we run into a situation where the system is strained or put under the stress, it won't totally break down.
In the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot happening, resorts closing down the strip, everything was falling apart, it seemed. And obviously Dieter is a crucial component of that. If people don't have benefits and they have to pay their rent, pay their meat for their meals, put food on the table, take care of their kids, couldn't the state have reallocated assets at the outset, acknowledging the limitations of training and so forth, but to really emphasize that early on so that it didn't linger all the way through?
Well, you're mistaken there, John. We did realize it early on. We did allocate additional assets from day one. We transferred people from different departments into that department to try to deal with all these claims. But when you transfer new people, you've got to train the people to deal with these claims. And then when you've got to vet these things to the extent that half of them, hundreds of millions of dollars, were fraudulent claims. And they made it worse for the people that had legitimate claims. So we recognize the problem that it was. It's just not something that's easy to fix.
I know we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to try and get to a couple other topics real quickly here. I want to look ahead very quickly to the next election. I'm going to assume you're running for re-election when the time comes.
I am.
Okay.
I'm running for election.
Sheriff Lombardo, Clark County, as you know, and North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee have come out. I'm sure things will change. You know them well. You've been down here. You know how that works. What do you think are going to be the key issues years down the line for what your reelection is that might differentiate you from whether it's Mr. Lombardo, Mr. Lee, or whoever else might be running?
Yeah, well, we've got 2 up north and 2 down here, so at least 4 people have already said that they're running. I think what you're going to have to look at is what somebody's plan are and what they've done. It's easy to sit back and be a Monday morning quarterback, when you come to these situations. This state faced a pandemic that, if it comes once in a century, it's just amazing. It was devastating to our entire economy. We needed to make some really, really hard decisions. And I needed to stand my ground and put in mind what was the absolute best for all of the residents of the state of Nevada, the 3.2 million people that call Nevada home. And I believe we did that. And I think we did it as best we possibly can. We're in a situation where we were concerned about running out of body bags. That's how bad it was, and how bad the air quality could get, as it did in some areas, from, the situation that we face. It's just, it's very difficult to balance keeping our hospitals open and not overstressing our healthcare system, at the same time not totally destroying our economy, trying to keep people so that they could pay their rent, trying to keep people so they could get food on the table, and do testing and start up the vaccine program. We had a lot of balls in the air at one time, and it was very, very difficult to do. I think we made the best decisions we could based on the information that was available at the time. And like I say, I think we're going to come out better. We're going to come out stronger, and we're going to come out with a better economy and a better future.
Final question here. Environmental. Lake Mead's been dropping. That's been an ongoing issue. We all know, with the issue of the water levels at Lake Mead. What can the state do? There's talk, as there has been, about draining Lake Powell. What kind of measures can Nevada take, or encourage the federal government to take, to try and make sure our water supply isn't damaged further?
Well, that's one thing that I'm familiar with, Lake Mead and the water situation. I spent 10 years on the county commission. I was on the water authority for 10 years, the water district for 10 years. You can't just drain Lake Powell into Lake Mead. These are issues that are dealt with by the Department of the Interior and the BLM that deal with those sort of situations. The best thing we can do at the state level is conservation. We signed a bill that helps with Southern Nevada Water District that's going to remove non-functional turf, which is going to save tens of thousands of acre feet of water per year. That's going to help us get further along. We need to do more in terms of education, in terms of saving the water that we do have and not wasting it. Now, most of the water you use inside of your house is reclaimed. It's put back through the system. It's put back in the lake. We take it back out again. But the water we use outside, we don't get back. So we need to do more in terms of what's going to be allowed, what's going to be where we conserve more. And that's done a lot at the state level, but a lot of that is done at local jurisdictions as well.
Some might suggest that Las Vegas over the last 20 years or so has done a pretty good job of starting to conserve, and that the real drain on the Colorado is further upstream. So is there anything that you as governor can do to encourage farmers up north and other states or to stop sapping so much from the Colorado?
Well, the Colorado River allocation is something that's been in place for many, many, many years. Nobody is going to get that. People say, well, why don't you get an increased allocation from the Colorado River? That would be all well and good, but for us to get increased allocation, we'd have to take it from somebody else because there's no more water coming down the Colorado. Nobody wants to give up their water. That's the old Western saying, you drink whiskey and you fight over water. I mean, that's the situation that we're in. We need to help people use the water efficiently. We are currently in a situation where the lake is dropping, but there's not an immediate danger to anybody, certainly in Southern Nevada or Clark County. We don't use our whole allocation of the Colorado River. So there's still room for growth, reasonable growth, and we just need to be more cognizant of it. But I think this shows you, when you see what's happening with the lake, when you see what's happening with the temperature, when you walk outside this afternoon, global warming is real. It's here and it's affecting our way of life.
Last question. You mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, the lottery, the raffle for the coronavirus.
There you go.
I've been here long enough. How far does Nevada have to go to recover? How long of a recovery are you talking about here?
Well, I don't have a magic number if that's what you're talking about in terms of people getting vaccinated.
No, I guess I'm talking more financially, more from an economic standpoint here. We've seen how hard Las Vegas in particular was hit. How long is it going to take to get back?
I apologize for talking over you. We've been hit extremely hard, no doubt, in Southern Nevada, but I'm in constant communication with our resort community, with our small businesses, with our chambers and so forth and so on. We lost some jobs. We're bringing them back. I can tell you our economy is really starting to heat up. I think you're going to see a very, very rapid recovery in our convention business going into the third and fourth quarters, going into 2022. You're going to see a lot more of that. And we need to do what we can to facilitate that. As we get more international travel coming back, you're going to see people coming to Las Vegas. The resorts are doing well now on the weekends. I mean, they've got people coming in, whether they're coming from California or wherever locally, the areas. But during the week, we need more conventions and meetings coming. And we do have a lot more booked in the third and fourth quarter. We had the World of Concrete was here a couple weeks back, and we had a big Barrett-Jackson auto auction at the convention center last weekend. And that all brings people into our economy. But I think you're going to see us emerge and rebound very, very strongly as we put more and more people back to work and the economy builds on itself.
I was going to ask, that's one of the challenges is people say there aren't enough people applying for jobs. They're short-staffed up and down throughout the valley.
Yep, it is, and it's difficult. We do have a labor shortage in some areas. We've got a child care shortage, which is one of the reasons people aren't going back to work. They have a place, you've got 2 kids, you got to have a place to send them. Our schools aren't open yet. They're all for the summer break. So as we get into, I think, August, September, and kids are going back to school and jobs are available, you'll see a lot more happening.
All right, Governor, I know you've got to run. I appreciate the time. We should do this more often. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for the time.
I look forward to it. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, John. Have a great one.
Take care.